Even as markets digested the news about Raghuram Rajan's refusal to seek a second term as the chief of the RBI, the government has unleashed a wave of foreign direct investment reforms, paving the way really for more inflows in sectors like pharma, aviation and defense. So will the centre's latest push be enough to combat the volatility that has been triggered by Rajan's decision to step down? I'm Vikram Oza. You're watching the special show on the Big Bang FDI reforms. And joining us this evening in this discussion is Mahesh Gupta, the president at PhD Chamber of Commerce and Industry. We also have Sanjay Sinha, founder at Citrus Advisors, joining us. Samir Rastogi is managing partner at India Juris, and Raghuvir Srinivasan is associate editor at the Hindu Business Line. Let me start off by asking you, Sanjay Sinha, while the FDI announcements, they are a good push to India's manufacturing, to their services, as well as trading. I had a thought going through my head that before the FDI reforms were announced, how much was a Rexit seen as a negative for the Indian economy by the markets, because there was that real and palpable fear that Raghuram Rajan will not continue. How real were those fears before these reforms were announced today?
So I would look at both these things as unrelated to each other. Dr. Raghuram Rajan's decision to quit has implications on three markets, primarily on the currency, secondly on the bonds, and lastly on the equity market. Now therefore, if you look at as to what happened in the markets today, it's probably expressing as to how would the relative impacts be factored in. Currency markets have been the one which have been the largest hit by that decision, and I think we have not played out the entire set of events. This will probably climax anytime between September to December. The bond markets, of course, are in the process of trying to factor in what would be the total impact of his exit. And the equity markets are, I think, more influenced by what is going to be the outcome of the Rexit referendum, and less to do with what is happening in terms of the changes at the Reserve Bank of India. But the FDI norms that have come out today is probably trying to send out a signal that the reform processes that the government is choosing to pursue, these reform processes are not so to say, influenced by the presence or the absence of an individual at the head of an institution,
right,
but it is part of an ongoing process. And I was listening to some of the comments which was being made by the finance ministry officials in the context of the latest round of FDI relaxation. I think the point that was being made is that, despite the FDI being relaxed in defense, not a very significant amount of interest was visible, and therefore they have tried to make it a little more attractive for foreign direct investment to come into that sector. So I think that is the one where I think the message lies, that the country as a whole is amenable to making the ground much more acceptable for foreign direct investment. And I think that's how we should look at it.
Raghuvir Srinivasan, if you can come in on this, like Sanjay Sinha is saying, do you agree with him when he says that these two factors are unrelated, really? What has been announced by way of FDI today and Raghuram Rajan's exit, those seem to him as unrelated. Do you agree with that point of view?
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. I mean, there may not be a relation between Raghuram Rajan announcing his decision to move back to Chicago at the end of his term and the reforms and FDI announced today. That may not be intentional, but then the fact is that the effect is there. I mean, the point is, till this afternoon, TV channels and newspaper websites were going to town with Rexit, but now the agenda and the focus is completely shifted to the reforms on the FDI front. It may not have been intentional, but the effect is the same. The effect is that of moving the focus away from Rexit to Big Bang reforms, so to say, in FDI.
Sanjay, how real are those fears about the flight of FDI post Rajan's exit, if we can treat that separately as well? How much do you think, if we are to look at today's developments, how do you think it's going to offset the new FDI reforms that have been announced today that puts most sectors under the automatic route? How much will that negativity around Rajan's exit change thanks to these reforms?
I would say probably on the marginal. because the largest pressure that we are going to see on the currency front is going to come when we have this close to $20 billion worth of FCNRB deposits maturing, and that leading to a large outflow of dollar reserves. And mind you, this is going to be happening at a time when the world is going to be passing through a fairly turbulent time, because maybe the US Fed has chosen not to raise the rates in the June policy, but it is quite likely that any time between July to December this will happen. So we cannot, by the way, we cannot also underplay the importance of the FDI, because in the financial year 2016, as per the government statement itself, close to $54 billion has come as FDI. So if you have a possibility of a $20 billion worth of outflow and you have a single financial year inflow of $54 billion, I think that does lend a little bit of stability to the currency. But I think the way the governor of the Reserve Bank of India is going to handle the policy during this phase when the currency movements may not be synchronized. The FDI flows may not actually come when the foreign deposits are going out. How is the currency movement going to be managed at that point of time is going to be crucial.
And that too is not too far away. But Mahesh, Gupta, come in on this. The timing of the FDI announcements today and in the past has been rather interesting, and that's what I started off by talking with Sanjay Sinha as well as Raghuvir Srinivasan. The last time we had this was in November 2015, just after the BJP was faced with the electoral debacle in Bihar when the Nitish Kumar Lalu Yadav combined. They trumped BJP's might, and almost immediately after that, the government at the centre hiked the FDI limit in at least 15 key sectors, including defence, the broadcasting sector, as well as civil aviation. I remember Prime Minister Modi was visiting the UK then, and this was seen as a major PR strategy to counter the entire intolerance debate as well that was big at that time. What do you make of the timing of the reforms, at least in these two instances that we are comparing, the one I just mentioned, and now in the light of a Rexit, the certainty of the departure of Raghuram Rajan from the RBI in September?
I think it was overdue, and it has come in at the right time. The negative impact of the RBI governor going out would be compensated by this announcement immediately. And it's a good thing that this FDI is required in manufacturing sectors. An automatic approval route in so many sectors, and even some sectors with government approval, will send a very positive signals to manufacturing sector. And instead of FDI coming in only in the share market, this FDI would come in into manufacturing sector, which is a longer duration FDI and more stable FDI. So I think it's a welcome step, and we must all give a positive signal to the market.
But I'm still going to linger a little bit with Raghuvir Srinivasan about this point, about the last time that this was announced, the Big Bang reforms was in November 2015, a Diwali bonanza, so to speak. But the timing of it is crucial, isn't it? From a government standpoint, Raghuvir, if you can put that in context, how crucial is it to come out at a time like this with those Big Bang reforms?
Yeah, you're right. The comparisons between then and now are almost similar. The government was under fire then politically for losing Bihar, and it needed to do something to get the focus back on a positive plane. And it came out with Big Bang reforms in FDI. And similar is the case now. It is under fire for the exit of Rajan. Fair or unfair, that's another matter altogether. But the fact is that the government has been seen in poor light. And this is a brilliant way, if it was intentional indeed, and I really don't know if it was intentional or otherwise. But going by precedents that it has happened once before, and it's happening it again, I would like to think that this is an intentional way of shifting the focus away from a negative publicity that was in the air, and moving on to something which is more a positive reflection of the government's policy. But having said that, I think these reforms are welcome, irrespective of what the motivation behind these reforms are. The fact is that they are good and they are welcome, and they're well timed, maybe from the government's perspective.
That's right. Would global markets also look at these developments as favorably right now at a time that India is looking for that FDI to come in? When you look at the timing of all these developments, the two instances that I've cited, Sanjay Sinha, it is a jittery time really for the market. They're still grappling with the possibility of a Brexit. The announcement Rajan made could have waited for a few days until the referendum was through in the UK. What do you make of that?
So on that count, I absolutely agree that, if his term was getting over on the 4th of September, I actually am not able to understand as to what was the need to write a missive to his colleagues in Reserve Bank of India 2.5 months before that. And that too, just a week before the Brexit referendum, when, the entire world is on tenterhooks, because, despite whatever be the opinion polls that have come out this morning, which seem to be suggesting that the UK might choose to remain within the European Union, at the end of the day, it's a very emotional issue there, and, these emotions have run up and down, also related to a very sad event that has happened last week.
Yes.
I would say that, till the time that we have the referendum outcome before us on the afternoon of Friday, we would not really know as to which way it's going to turn. So in that sense, I think, in terms of the timing of this announcement by Dr. Rajan is very unusual. And I'm sure there must be some reason for him to have done so, because I think what is, in fact, in this context, what is, two things are very, very important. The one important aspect at this point of time is that who is going to be his nominated successor.
Sure.
That identity is very important, because, the governor of Reserve Bank of India is a person who is perceived to be above politics and is above any influence from the government.
Yes.
So an appointment that may not necessarily measure up to Dr. Rajan in terms of academic stature.
Yes.
But if he's able to measure up to his astute nature in terms of being absolutely impartial
Yes.
in the discharge of his duty, I think that's important. And the second thing was that, there are two major things that Dr. Rajan had achieved. One of them was a lot of reforms in the banking sector and a lot of stability on the currency front.
Correct.
These two initiatives and and I would say the tremendous amount of success that he has been able to achieve, that needs to be continued. And therefore, it's important that, the next set of policies do carry forward this.
Right. Mahesh, Gupta, do you agree with that? That in the exit of Raghuram Rajan, the entire perception that had been created of India as being stable, with the accent so strongly on containing inflation and what has happened on the currency front as well, with his exit now, how is the international community now looking at the Indian market as a place where they would like to park their funds now with these reforms coming in as well? That much more of a possibility to have someone who is not really going to be, in a sense, a yes man to the government. How crucial is that going to be?
Well, I think the post of RBI governor is important, no doubt about it. We must have a very positive person who can control and who could be independent. But let's not forget that he is a shadow of what the government is doing. If government is doing fine and if the economy is doing well, the international players will look at India in a very positive way. There is no two opinion about it that our Prime Minister is going all over the world, creating a very positive atmosphere. People are getting more impressed on that rather than only looking at a governor. And that positivity will still continue. So people have interest in India. Not only we have a stable government, people look at India with 1.3 billion people.
Yeah.
They're looking at aspirations of Indian people. That is all positive. Being positive, I don't think exit would create so much negativity. No doubt about it, we had a stable and a very positive RBI governor. So his exit is a negative point. But in a longer run, if people have to invest in the country, they will look at all the aspects rather than only governor aspect. So all the aspects remain very bullish at this moment of time.
Raghuvir, Srinivasan, do tell me if you agree with what you're hearing from Mahesh Gupta. In that farewell note, Rajan does say that he was open to seeing through the work he started on controlling inflation, cleaning up the debt mess that the banking system finds itself in. And no matter how you see it, either as Rajan's decision to not continue or even the government's reluctance to have him continue, do you believe that if these FDI announcements weren't made, it would have created unease among global money managers, both about the government's intent and its ability for the reform process?
No, I think we need to be very clear about this. The timing may be a little, interesting of the FDI announcements today, but then they're totally unrelated to Rajan's exit. Rajan's exit might still have an impact on the markets if, things don't pan out the way they're expected to on the FCNRB conversions. Now, if there is a problem there, as another panelist, just mentioned, in terms of the U.S. Fed deciding to once again revise its rates upwards, or if there is volatility in the forex markets, then come September, October, when the deposits mature, there could still be, an issue to deal with. And secondly, a lot depends on who the next governor is going to be. It's going to be a really big shoe to fill. It has always been the case with the RBI. Subbarao had a big shoe to fill when he succeeded Y.V. Reddy, and Rajan had the same when he succeeded Subbarao.
Yes.
RBI has been, in that particular respect, lucky to have exceptional candidates as its governors till now. Now, a lot therefore depends on whether the government is able to find the right person to fill the void being left behind by Rajan. Now, that will decide what happens in terms of the global markets and global investors' reactions to Rajan's exit. But the FDI the relaxation in FDI norms itself are to be welcomed, and I don't think beyond the timing aspect they are connected with Rajan's move at all.
The big bang FDI reforms have been announced by the government today, and this in the light of Raghuram Rajan, the RBI governor's imminent exit. I want to take this to Mahesh Gupta, one of our panelists who's joining us this evening. With Rajan's exit imminent, Mr. Gupta, do you think we are moving towards an accelerated loose monetary policy era? Can the government actually push through that cause to spur the economy now? Or do you think the new incumbent, not to mention the government, is going to find their hands rather tied because of the fears around inflation?
Well, I don't think we can have a knee-jerk reaction in our economy right now. The policy is well laid down. The banks' balance sheets are being corrected. And the real issue is what interest rates do you charge in the economy, whether it's inflationary pressure or not. Well, it will all depend on how good the monsoon is, and the monsoon seems to be, is expected to be far better. The inflationary pressure will reduce down, and the economy is expected to do better. The government wants to reduce, I think, the interest rate a little bit. So all those things are pointing towards a positive direction. So whosoever incumbent the governor is there at this moment, I don't think the policy would be loose. The policy has to be sound, and it is based on economics, and I think that will work in the longer run. And I don't think...
Srinivasan, what's your expectation on this? As far as industry is concerned, they would obviously, I mean, all of us want a sound policy, but what makes for a sound policy? Like we're hearing from him, there is that fear around the currency markets as well as it stands. But how real is the fear that we are looking at, more generally speaking? Do you think opening up FDI in these sectors that the government is talking about today addresses at least some of those funding worries that stand in Indian industry, considering the unrecovered debt sitting on the books of our banks, which of course preclude their lending abilities for the future? What do you think about that? Raghuvir, Srinivasan, that question was for you.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. See, we have to remember two things here, basically. One is that monetary policy in future is going to be decided by the Monetary Policy Committee, and it cannot be changed, on the whims of an individual anymore. And that's the reform that was brought in by Rajan himself. So it's not going to be a reaction like, okay, we'll have a loose monetary policy henceforth because Rajan is gone. I think the committee will decide that. That checks and balances are in place for that. And as for the cleaning up process of bank balance sheets, the point is that the unfortunate circumstances under which Mr. Rajan is exiting, it is going to be very difficult for a successor, even if he really wants to stop the cleanup process for genuine reasons to do that, because it will be seen as giving in, and that is why Rajan was denied a second term. So either way, I don't see much of a change going forward on these two aspects. And as for the FDI relaxation and connecting that with the FCNR deposits redemption, I don't think they are really connected in that sense. What you're going to get as FDI will be determined based on individual cases and whether investor finds these rules interesting and whether there's a market for him here. it doesn't mean that necessarily because the government has loosened its FDI norms, money is going to start pouring in tomorrow.
Exactly.
There are many other factors that investors will take into account before they commit money into the country.
Absolutely. And one of those factors is the kind of policies being framed by the RBI as well. And that's going to largely depend on who the next incumbent is going to be. Rastogi, Rajan had just initiated the big banking sector cleanup. We were just talking about that. Can you make a reasonable guess here? Do you think the cleanup of the banking sector is going to be a cause that any new governor is going to push through? And this may well be a reflection of the government's own intent as well on the operation, because as most of us are aware, politically connected lending is a big reason we are in this mess in the first place. So will crony capitalism continue to thrive without Rajan? It seems like a real fear. What do you say?
Yeah, I mean, such kind of bad debts or such kind of lending to houses, I think this would definitely stop, and the banking mess which is there, that would be over. And the new person, the new governor who comes, definitely will be able to tackle with the situation. And the kind of thing the government is coming out with, I think that would help the situation better, yeah.
Sanjay Sinha, do you agree at this point in time, when you're looking at this big mess on the books of banks right now, when the entire attempt has started to clean it up, at this point in time, how real is that fear that, again, we are going to go back to ways in which that unscrupulous lending that had happened is going to come back?
I think, the medicine of the last few quarters would be a fair deterrent for repeating the same mistake all over again. At the same time, we also need to be conscious that all the lending that was done by the banks was not with malified intention. There were certain changes in the global macroeconomic situation which led to the collapse of the commodity prices. Also, the inability of the local government to clear many of the legislative processes which would have eased the infrastructure projects also came in the way of making many of these loans bad loans. Now, after the 2 quarters of AQR, I think a reasonably large quantum of the cleanup of the banking books has already happened. Whether the banks will go back to that same method of lending, I think that is unlikely, given the fact that now there is so much of scrutiny, and mind you, there is also now a banking board bureau that is going to be overseeing a lot of the action of the banking sector. So in sum and substance, I think what I see is likely to happen is that we've seen a lot of write-downs by the banking sector in the last financial year. The macroeconomic situation is now improving and hopefully should improve even more. If that is going to happen, we'll probably see a few write-backs into the books of banks rather than more write-downs. So that is one positive thing that I see. I think the bigger challenge for the banks right now is capitalization. And I think that's where the government needs to come out on the front foot to do something about it.
Sure.
There was an element of support that could have come from the reserves of Reserve Bank of India, which I don't know whether his successor will actually do. If that happens, I think we should see better days for the banking sector than what we have seen in the past.
Well, that is the hope. And of course, as far as the FDI reforms go, the PM tweeting that the centre has radically liberalized the FDI regime with the objective of providing all that impetus that is currently required for employment and for job creation in India. Let's hope that all of those objectives that is driving the entire reform process, when you talk about all these FDI avenues that have been opened up in industry, that really are met. I want to thank our gentlemen for joining us with their perspective on this discussion. Bye for now.